Christian is an environmental remote sensing scientist with the Environment and Sustainability Group of Chevron's Enterprise Technical Center. He has responsibility for providing technical consulting and remote sensing geospatial data processing workflow development to support environmental applications across the enterprise, as well as leading research projects focused on environmental remote sensing and unmanned systems. Christian is a member of Chevron's GIS functional team for emergency response, where he serves as a remote sensing subject matter expert. Christian has a PhD in remote sensing from Imperial College London and the British Antarctic Survey. Sounds cold. He currently serves as the chairman of the Geological Remote Sensing Group North American chapter.
Wow, thanks, Judd. I didn't realize you were going to read all of that.
Well, I didn't think I was, but I decided to. You deserve it.
Wow, okay, as you've got extra time. Thanks, Judd, and yeah, thanks to the team for organising this virtual conference. Yeah, I think the talks we've had so far have been fascinating, and yeah, I think under the circumstances, this is an awesome workshop, and I appreciate the opportunity to present. So I wanted to just firstly, can you see my screen? Is that all working properly before I go on?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So I wanted to give an update on some work we've been doing in Chevron. We've been looking at the use of unmanned aerial systems for oil spill response and emergency response for a number of years. I just kind of want to give a bit of an update on some relatively recent developments. In spite of the pandemic, we were able to achieve some good outcomes from last year, and I want to kind of talk about those particular aspects on this talk. So just a summary, I'm going to sort of briefly talk about, we had a great overview of the Polaris Pyxis system from David Chenault earlier on. I'll just talk briefly about a little field pilot we did in the San Joaquin Valley last year. Then I want to spend the bulk of the talk discussing our Chevron's long endurance beyond visual line of sight UAS program, what we've done to date, and what our plans are for the future. And then I'm going to close out with just sort of raising a piece of work that we kicked off recently within the community to focus on developing what we're calling an atlas of shoreline oiling. So firstly, I want to talk about the Polaris Pyxis field testing that we've performed. As David mentioned before, you know, we've been working with Polaris and with American Aerospace over the last few years to integrate the Pyxis camera onto a small UAS, and then to field test this system, really to understand you know, the use cases and how the sensor performs when we fly it from a small UAS. So the system on the left, this is actually the Oscar drone. Chevron actually owns and operates this now, and we've been doing a number of field tests. The test I want to talk about, we did late last year within the southern San Joaquin Valley. The objective was really to understand, you know, how does Pyxis perform when we're looking at sort of upstream and onshore potential leak issues. So the scope for the test, we wanted to overfly some natural seep locations, and then we also flew over some of our some of Chevron's upstream facilities, really to sort of understand the capabilities of the drone-based Pyxis system. So this example here, this is from a known natural seep location in the southern San Joaquin Valley. The Oscar system, it has a visible camera, just to provide some context, and then it has the Polaris Pyxis camera. The image on the left is the visible image of this natural seep location. You can hopefully see there's sort of a culvert here, and then you can see this black small stream of, this is essentially crude oil coming from a natural seep. The red box is the extent of the Polaris Pyxis inset video. And so on the right, you can see the Polaris Pyxis result. This is what is termed the E-therm product. So this is essentially a thresholding of the polarized thermal signature, and you can set the threshold depending upon, you know, you can set the threshold dependent upon sort of atmospheric and environmental conditions to detect oil. So we had some good success in detecting oil here. You see these red pixels that are consistent with the extent of the onshore oil within this small upstream here. So that's an encouraging result. The other example I want to show, this is from a Chevron upstream facility. This is some pump jacks we have in one of our fields. One of the use cases we're investigating is how and whether we can use airborne Pyxis for upstream leak detection. One of the routine things we do is aerial surveillance to detect issues and fix them as quickly as possible. And at the moment, we're doing that, visually with folks in planes. So the ultimate objective here is, can we use more advanced sensors to detect these issues in a sort of a more automated fashion? So the example here, this is from, as I said, an upstream facility. Sometimes we have common issues that we have to deal with. Sometimes we have some small leaks from the wellheads, and these are issues that need to be identified and fixed as quickly as possible. We wanted to test, can we pick up these issues with Pyxis? So one thing we did find with this sort of straightforward, simple field test is we weren't able to use the Pyxis camera. So although this is a negative result, I think this is a positive result in that it helps us to understand, where can we use this particular system? And I think it points to the fact that in this particular context, the oil was sort of finely distributed over a small area. It had dried out, so it wasn't really fresh oil. So again, it helps us to understand, where can we use this drone-based polarizing thermal imaging system. So that was the Polaris Pyxis test. I want to talk about a big effort that's picked up a lot of steam in the last sort of year and a half, is around the use of long endurance, medium altitude UAS for beyond visual line of sight operations. We've been working with a company called American Aerospace for a number of years and have tested these MAIL platforms for oil spill response. We had a test a couple of years ago offshore Santa Barbara. We also did some testing in the Gulf of Mexico with their sensor system. We're doing more and more in the space of long endurance BVOLS UAS. And in particular, our pipeline company, Chevron Pipeline and Power, has really kind of picked up the ball here and is really driving forward with the objective of achieving routine beyond visual line of sight operations to support pipeline surveillance, upstream surveillance, and also a range of other use cases, including in the offshore domain. So currently, again, as I said, we've been working with American Aerospace. American Aerospace have been working also with the Lone Star Test Range, with NASA, and also with the Pipeline Research Council International. Kind of where we're at with this program. We're kind of taking a crawl, walk, run approach. We need to sort of prove out the technology, prove out the sensors, build up a history of safe operations in order that we can achieve the approvals from the FAA. So kind of where we're at, we performed a phase 1 pilot in the southern San Joaquin Valley late last year, and I'll talk about that in subsequent slides. American Aerospace have a project with NASA called SIO, which is the System Operationalization and Integration Program. They are currently in the San Joaquin Valley and will be doing a demo next week. The scope of SIO is really to understand the capabilities of sense and avoid systems. And actually there'll be, as I said, there'll be a demo with NASA next week in the San Joaquin Valley. Chevron are planning for phase 2 of our San Joaquin Valley program. And as part of that, that will focus on midstream pipeline and upstream applications. And that's loosely scheduled for sort of middle of this year. Another project that I'm kind of leading is focusing on, what can we do outside of San Joaquin Valley, and how can we support other parts of our business, other business units, and in particular our Gulf of Mexico business unit. As I mentioned before, we have, we've done some field testing down there with AATI. We didn't fly the UAS in that case, but one of the things we'd like to do next is to actually get the approvals to be able to operate beyond visual line of sight UAS down there, to focus on upstream surveillance, but also emergency response and oil spill response. So that's tentatively scheduled for later this year, probably in Q3. And then beyond that, we have plans for a phase 3 pilot in San Joaquin Valley, probably early next year, and that will ultimately lead into AATI achieving a type certification, and then we hope to transition to routine beyond visual on site UAS operations. So that's kind of the roadmap and what we've done and where we're going. I did want to show, I think it's videos speak louder than words, and I have a short video here I wanted to show because I think it nicely illustrates some of the work that our pipeline company has done and kind of where we're going with the technology. So I'll just press play on this. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor of what we've done so far, gives you a sense about the platform that we're working with, which is called the Resolute Eagle. One thing that you maybe did notice on from that video was a sensor integration called Instamaps. This is essentially a visible, high resolution visible and thermal imaging system that can create GIS ready image services in near real time. So, a lot of applicability to, real-time surveillance, both onshore and offshore. So I mentioned that Chevron had performed an initial phase 1 pilot with AATI in the southern San Joaquin Valley. This map shows the extent of the area that was used for this field pilot. So AATI operated the Resolute Eagle platform out of the Buttonwillow Airport that's located here on the right. We had extents of Chevron pipeline that are indicated here in green that were overflown. And then we also had our 2 upstream fields in Semrick and McKittrick that were the focus for this phase 1 pilot. In total, we had about 100 square miles where we were performing flight operations, and we were flying at around 1,100 feet AGL. For the phase 1 pilot, we had the stipulation that we had to use chase plane to maintain line of sight, but we hope with subsequent phases that that requirement for the chase plane will be removed ultimately before we can get to our approvals to operate true BVOLS. So I wanted to show a few examples of some of the data and give you a sense about sort of the use cases that we're targeting here. So as I said, the Instamap system that AATI operates, it collects near real-time thermal data. One of the use cases that we're focusing on is thermal surveillance. So for a number of our fields in San Joaquin Valley, these are heavy oil fields where we have to use steam injection and steam flood to unlock the heavy oil that's at depth. So one of the issues we have to monitor is for thermal anomalies. We have to perform surveillance to identify potential loss of containment. These are environmental and health and safety issues. So one of the high priority potential use cases for the beyond visual on site UAS is performing thermal surveillance. So this is just some results from the phase 1 pilot. Again, I'll move forward. This is a better illustration, just some zoomed in area of one of our upstream fields. I think this is Simric. So you can see, the visible. You can see in the thermal some relatively subtle thermal anomalies associated with some of the steam distribution lines that are running under roads. So this gives us some confidence that we're able to see subtle thermal impacts that would potentially provide an indicator for potential issues. So that's the thermal. some of the other use cases in the upstream domain, you know, Chevron flies daily over our fields to identify issues, in particular, you know, loss of containment, leak issues, and any other anomalies. Each of our fields is at least fly once a day. Sometimes we fly up to 3 times a day over certain fields. So the real opportunity here with BVLS UAS and long endurance UAS is being able to replace these existing piloted operations and automate a lot of the analysis. So you know, the other big use case is what we're calling production patrol. This is where we're overflying and currently visually looking for issues. So we're looking to identify leaks. And so, you know, this is an example imagery we collected as part of the phase 1 pilot. Clearly identify some staged leaks. And so it just points to the fact that there's the imagery quality is sufficient to be able to start developing analytics that could automate some of this process. There's a few examples here. Again, an example of a stage leak. And then you can see on the right here, so the quality of the imagery that allows us to potentially identify some issues at pump jacks. So that's the work in San Joaquin Valley. As I mentioned, we're looking at potentially doing operations in the Gulf of Mexico. Excuse this pretty complicated map here. The point I want to make is that as part of our sort of crawl, walk, run approach, you know, we need to get approvals from the FAA. We're not going to try and get approvals for the whole of the Gulf of Mexico. We have to sort of take an iterative approach and start small and build out from there. So, you know, we've developed kind of this roadmap with the ultimate goal of being able to cover our Chevron operations with the BVLS UAS, but we have to start small. So this complicated map just kind of shows you the extent of those areas. And so we're focusing on, for our initial field trial, we're going to focus in on our zone 1. We hope to do this later this year. Again, we'll be working with AATI with their Resolute Eagle platform, which was the platform that was flown in San Joaquin Valley. Objective here would be to test the drone, but also their next generation Instamap system for offshore surveillance and then for emergency response. So currently where we're at is that the COA is with the FAA. We're waiting to hear about whether that's been approved or not. And, you know, we'll start planning that field trial subsequent to that. So I just wanted to close out with a smaller bit of work that we kicked off relatively recently between myself and also other members of sort of the oil spill response community, including Ed Owens. We're interested in we kind of put together this concept for an atlas of shoreline oiling. And I think this is one thing we've kind of identified, you know, with using UAS is that access to the UAS is like really quite straightforward and quite easy now. There's a lot of pilots that are trained and competent to be able to collect data with UAS, but actually there may be a bit of a gap when it comes to like interpreting aerial data from UAS, and in particular, you know, video or imagery to identify like shoreline oiling. So, you know, we've kind of come up with this concept, a small group of us come up with this concept of this sort of atlas. And the concept really, you know, would kind of be like a web-based sort of job aid that would provide a lot of examples of shoreline oiling, you know, different substrates, different oil types, different levels of oiling. It would show false positives. You know, and ultimately the objective is to provide kind of a reference that we can refer to when it comes to interpreting data that we're collecting from UAS, and in particular, kind of the low-hanging fruit data, so visible imagery, thermal imagery, and video. You know, if often we have situations where, you know, we might have a remote location where we may not have we may not have a trained SCAT expert, but we might have somebody with a UAS. So the opportunity is, can we use that pilot to collect data and provide some reference to be able to enable them to interpret that data and provide some useful observations. So that's kind of this concept that we've kind of developed so far. You know, it's still very early on. We're still sort of trying to understand what the guardrails for this project. But I definitely want to throw this out there that if you're interested in kind of joining the team, I put Ed's contact information up there. Please reach out to him, because I know we definitely like further support, and I still want to get the help from folks who are interested in participating in this kind of effort. So with that, I think I've run a little long, but I'll leave it there. Thank you, and I'll take any questions. And there's just a few acknowledgements there to various folks.
You didn't go long at all. You're right on time.
Okay, perfect.
And thank you for the excellent presentation. And as you all know, I spent the better part of the summer and through fall of 2019 at the Simric oil field. And yes, there was some wonderful imaging targets there. Yeah. Jenna?
Thanks. Yeah, we have one question so far. What is the scope of the proposed GOM offshore surveillance? What type of sensors?
Great question. Yeah, so I think the use cases we're going to focus on really going to be offshore surveillance, but then oil spill and emergency response. The opportunity here is with AOTI's Instamap system is that by the time we do that field pilot, they will have integrated a multispectral near infrared camera system into that integration. So essentially for that field trial, we will have RGB, we'll have at least one near infrared band, I think a couple of near infrared bands, and then the thermal system. So, for doing like oil spill mapping, we're going to have a good set of bands to work with to be able to enable oil spill detection and semi-quantification. So that's kind of what we got planned. Good question though.
Okay, if that's all, then that brings us to the conclusion of this session. Thank you very much, Christian.